expecting anything from FedEx?
No. Not unless it's the, Oh my god, it's the Ripro!
Well, some of you may know me from my first DIY Ripro video. A couple months ago, I had the idea that I could theoretically put together a DIY version of this tool, and I ended up making a build video about it. Consequently, Lee McCormack of Lee Likes Bikes and inventor of the Ripro, and Alex Bogusky, the industrial designer and backer of that project, in addition to being the host of Joy of Bike, well, they both know me because of that video too. And after a little bit of back and forth, it turned out that Alex was willing to send me out his personal Ripro so that I could improve my own. First of all, before I even get started, huge thank you to both Lee and Alex for sending this out to me. You know, you don't really think that when you're doing something for kicks and you're just trying to experiment a little bit and have some fun that the people who invent the thing that you're trying to replicate are gonna get a hold of you. So this is super cool, man. I really appreciate it, guys. So yeah, let's crack this thing open and find out how this thing goes together and what it actually looks like, and more importantly, what it feels like. I mean, the reckless DIYer in me wants to just put this together without reading the instructions, but I feel like that's a little bit rude considering they sent this to me to try out for nothing. And of course, as soon as I stop paying attention to the instructions, everything starts going a lot more smoothly. I'm sure nobody else watching this ever feels that way. It's probably just me. Man, you know, this feels so good to stand on. I think the radiuses that we use are alarmingly similar. You know, like the rockers don't feel like radically different. It's not fair, this one's harder. Anyway, there's lots of thinking, there's lots of experimenting that we have to do, but I think number one is let's get my ass kicked on a couple of workouts. The first thing that becomes immediately apparent when you step onto the Ripro is how much more stable it is. And this is for two reasons. One, simply the mass of the actual Ripro creates a totally different feel on the platform. The other being that there is a platform. On mine, the pedals are just so unbelievably unstable, and even though I had put pins to lock them into place, there's still a little bit of play, and it just really takes the focus off the movement pattern and puts it on balance, which sort of defeats the purpose. The next thing that I realized I really needed to do was just to correct the shape of the rockers. When I laid mine out on the first version, it was just kind of haphazard. Having the actual reference to ensure that I do have the same radiuses is just gonna help that feel to match up a little bit better. Now that I was foregoing with the pedals and going to a flat platform, that gave me the opportunity to change my mounting location for the lever arm itself. And this is actually fairly important, because if you think about a bike, the bottom bracket is the lever pivot. That being in the center of your stance, that should be where it is on the Ripro as well. And by having that mounting block on my old version, it forced the lever mounting location a little bit further forward, which just alters the movement pattern, making it a little bit less relevant to actual riding. The last thing that I had to look at was just making some adjustments to the lever shape. Now, ultimately, there's really no need to do this if you're gonna stick with bands. But if you thought that I wasn't gonna put dampers on this, you're a crazy person.
This is the end result of our sort of adaptation to real Ripro step one, right? What we have to do is try this out and figure out whether or not it actually even feels like the real deal. So let's hop on and see. My tolerances are atrocious, but it's fine for the time being.
You might be wondering to yourself, why even bother to adapt the old Ripro when I could just make a whole new one? And that's a really good question, but I'll leave that to past me to answer.
I apparently really just like redoing all of my work.
I'm just so happy about how this has turned out. This whole thing is just a monument to failure and to error. And I absolutely love it. It could not be more perfect in that sense. Not everybody works the way that I work, but let me just take you through what this process actually was. It was making rushed decisions that were based exclusively around the closest materials I had at hand and the fastest, easiest way I could get something done. You know, mistakes were made, you just move on. It's fine. I know that this isn't the final version, it's an iteration, it doesn't have to be perfect. I just wanted to set it up geometrically with the right kind of spacing for the pistons, make sure that the stroke length was gonna work within this unit. I wanted to see what sort of forces were gonna be applied to The plywood, like how hard can I push this? I set, you set these at 12 and you just row it out as hard as you can and listen for the sounds of cracking and make sure that is this something with these thicknesses of plywood that's gonna actually be usable for people? The nice thing about building something like this DIY is that if something does break, you can just fix it yourself. It's not a big deal. Cut a new piece and replace it and away you go. But it's not like you want to have to do that all the time. And that also creates some safety hazards and stuff as well, right? You want to make sure that the thing's going to be holding together for you, even if wood doesn't typically catastrophically fail, right? And just make sure that it was a testable unit. Once it's tested, then you can refine. Then it's time to actually get a final version done. But you got to be happy with it first. And there's no sense in spending hours and hours seeking perfection when the whole concept hasn't even been proven yet.
It's lighter. The whole thing is lighter. The rockers feel a little bit different, but the workout's exactly the same.
So with that confirmation that I was looking for that everything was gonna work, it was now time to actually take this into a different space. Having the Ripro meant I could take meticulous measurements of the production version, and now having those measurements allowed me to recreate a model of the Ripro in Fusion 360. So once I had all the basics mapped out, I could start working digitally to assemble plans for my final version of the Ripro, which ended up looking something like this. Version 3, DIY Ripro. I am so proud of this. And I have to say that the only reason that something like this gets to exist in the world is because Lee McCormack, Alex Bogusky, I'm kind of speechless, man. Their generosity in sending me out a Ripro to be able to take some measurements from so that I could replicate as close to the original geometry and just be able to create something that, in my opinion, is so beautiful, not just because of how it looks, but because of what it represents. Now, I'm sure you all want to see a build video of this. That's a very sensible thing, and you will get one. We're not quite there yet. I have all the footage from the build process. It's all being edited, but there's a few more loose ends that I need to tie up before we can actually release that. I'm hoping to release it in conjunction with a really, really exciting announcement. So until I can make that announcement, until I get some confirmation and some of the final details are sorted out, I'm gonna have to leave you hanging. What I will tell you, I don't wanna leave you with no information on this Ripro. What I will tell you is that it feels amazing. Having had the opportunity to test out the real deal Ripro, and then putting this together, in a blind back-to-back test, I would not be able to tell you which one I was on. So knowing that, I hope that's wet your whistle a little bit and got you excited for the final build video that will be coming out before not too terribly long. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Make sure that you know when I've got the next video coming out. I certainly made my fair share of mistakes putting this together. Until I have a few more mistakes to share with you, I'll see you next time.